Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 5 in PHP Programming. In this lesson I'm going to teach you about operators, and I'm going to start by talking about operator precedence. Now in PHP, operator precedence controls the order in which an expression is evaluated, with operators that have a higher precedence being evaluated first. So if we look here, we can see we have a multiplication operator, which is this asterisk symbol, and then we have an addition operator, which is this plus symbol, and the multiplication operator has a higher precedence than the plus operator. So when they both exist within an expression, the multiplication part will be evaluated first. So if we look at this expression here, you might assume that this will be evaluated as 2 plus 5 multiplied 10. So the result of 2 plus 5, which is 7, multiplied 10, which would equal 70. But it will not be evaluated that way. It will be evaluated as 5 multiplied 10, which equals 50, and then the result of that will be added to 2, which equals 52. And we can see the result of that here, 52. You can use parenthesis to explicitly set the order in which an expression will be evaluated. And to be honest, it's a good habit to get into, even if you don't need to use the parenthesis, because the expression is evaluated in the way that you want it to already. It's still good to use them because it just makes it really clear how this is being evaluated, and you could just, at a glance, you can look at it and just see. So it's a good habit to get into. So this here, because of the parentheses here, this will be evaluated first. So it would be 2 plus 5, which equals 7, and then the result of that result will multiply 10. So we can see this is the result of that. 2 plus 5, then multiply 10, which equals 70. When operators have equal precedence, then their associativity decides the order in which an expression is evaluated. So operators can be left associative, right associative, or non-associative. And if they are left associative, then the expression will be evaluated from the left to the right. And of course, if they're right associative, it will be the opposite, the right to the left. The subtraction symbol, which is this symbol here, the subtraction operator, is left associative. So that means this expression here is going to be evaluated as 2 minus 4, and the result of that, which is minus 2, will then minus 8. So the result of the overall expression is minus 10. So we can see it here is essentially, this is how it's evaluated. And you can probably see what I mean. If we had the parentheses here, then it will just make it really clear at a glance what is going on. So the result of that is minus 10, which we can see here. The equals operator, this operator here, is right associative. So that means the expression with the equals operator will be evaluated from right to left, or at least if the equals operator has other operators in the same expression, then they can affect it. But if you have an expression, for example, that has, like this one here, where it's got a equals b and then b equals c, this will be evaluated as b equals c. So c will be inserted into b, then the result of that will be inserted into a. So essentially it's evaluated like this: b equals c, then the result is inserted into a. So for example, this here, we've got a equals 2, b equals 4, c equals 8. This will be evaluated as c will be inserted into b, and then the result of that will be inserted into a. So it will result in them all being equal to 8. But if it was evaluated a different way, say for example, if it was left associative, then first it will be b equals you'll be inserting the value of b into a, which is 4, and then you'll be inserting c into b. So it affects the result, but because it's right associative, they all end up having the same value as the c variable. We can see the result of that now. See, they all are equal to 8. Operators of equal precedence that are non-associative are not allowed next to each other. So, as well as some operators being left associative and some right, you get some that are essentially neutral, they're non-associative. Yep, so this here is an example of an invalid expression because these operators are non-associative and they have the same precedence. They are not allowed in the same expression, essentially. So that will cause an error. But this is allowed because this operator here has a higher precedence than this operator here. So they are allowed next to each other, even though they are both non-associative. Now I'm going to move on to the next section of the lesson. And throughout this lesson, in other sections, there'll be more examples of precedence. So I hope this is giving you somewhat of a grasp of how it works. But yeah, don't worry, there'll be more examples along the way as well to help you better understand the way precedence works in PHP. So next we're going to look at arithmetic operators. Now, arithmetic operators are, as you could probably guess, used to perform arithmetic. And the result of an arithmetic expression will be of type int or float, whatever one is suitable. So if it's a whole number, it'll be of type int. If it has a decimal place, then it will be of type float or double, which is the same thing in PHP, float or double. So, we're going to start by looking at the identity operator, which converts a value to an int or float. Of course, depending on the value. So if it's a value that is a whole number or is equal to a whole number, then it will be converted to an integer. If it is a value that has a decimal place or will be is equal to a value that has a decimal place, then it will be converted to a float. So we can see that we've got some values here. Var equals 1, string 1, var 2 equals string 1.5, and then we're going to display the values of that so we can just see what that does. Let's get rid of that. And yep, arithmetic. So we can see, so let's have a quick look at what we're doing here. Yeah, so we're going to display the value of var. Then we're going to display the value of var when it has been converted to an int or a float. And then we're going to display the value of var2 and then the value of var2 once it's been converted to an int or a float. So we can see var, the variable name var has a string with a value of 1 in it. So that will be converted to an integer with a value of 1. So from string 1 to integer 1. The variable named var2, which contains a string with a value of 1.5 will be converted to a float or double with a value of 1.5. So it goes from string 1.5 to float 1.5. Now, there are different values. You can convert different values other than strings that contain numeric value. You can convert things like strings that actually contain text, or Boolean values, null, for example. There are some values that you can't convert. You can't convert an array, for example, that will result in an error. But other values you can. So just see. Yeah, so we can see we've got an array of values here, and we are essentially looping through that array and displaying the value once it's been converted to an int or float. So we can see here the string 0 converts to an int 0, the string 1 converts to an integer 1, the string 1.1 converts to in fact, just to make that more obvious what that does, so I should add a space there. Yeah, so we can see string 0 converts to an integer 0, string 1 converts to an integer 1, string 1.1 converts to a double 1.1, and actually let me just suppress that warning message. You might be wondering what this little symbol is here, and actually we're going to talk about that later on in the tutorial, but essentially it just suppresses errors and warnings, etc. And then we can see there's an empty string converts to an integer 0, a string of foo converts to an integer 0 because it is its string value. False, Boolean false converts to integer 0, Boolean true converts to integer 1, null converts to integer 0, and a standard class, so an empty class, converts to an integer 1. Now, the second arithmetic operator that we're going to look at is the negation operator, which inverts a value. So, for example, it will turn a positive value to that value's and a negative value equal to that positive value. So, from, as we can see here, from 2 to -2. So, or that positive value's equivalent negative value. Move that down there. Okay. So yeah, we're doing the same thing that we've done with the identity operator. First, we're displaying the value of var. Then we're displaying the value of var once it has been inverted. Then we're displaying the value of var2, and then the value of var2 once it has been inverted. We can see that first var is equal to 1. Then when it is inverted, it is equal to -1. We can see that it also converts them to either int or float. the same as the conversion operator does. So yeah, string 1 converts to integer -1. String 1.5 converts to float -1.5. And again, you can convert different types. Let's close that so we can see it a bit better. So we are looping through the array again and displaying the results, or each item in the array once it has been negated, and then we can see the results of that. So string 0 negates to integer 0, string 1 negates to an integer -1, string 1.1 negates to a double float, which is -1.1, etc, etc. We can see here false results in an integer 0 because it is seen as equal to 0, so it'll be essentially converted to 0 and then inverted after that, and obviously the invert of 0 is just 0. And boolean true will be negated when it's negated, results in integer -1, because boolean true will be converted to 1, and then it will be inverted, which equals -1. And then we can see null, which is of type null, negates to an integer 0, and object standard class results in an integer -1 when it has been negated. So we're going to look at the addition operator, which of course adds numbers together, and the result will be of type integer or float. The addition operator is left associative, so it evaluates from left to right. So we can see here this will be evaluated as 4 plus 6, then the result of that will be will add 8. And then again we are looping through the array, and we're adding 5 to the value each item in the array. Through each iteration of the array we're adding 5 to the value, then we're displaying that. So let's have a look at what that does. Yeah, so if we see, actually the first one is 1 plus 5, then the second one is 1 plus 5.5, and then we're doing this sum, which is 4 plus 6 plus 8, and then the loop. So yeah, 1 plus 5 is 6, 1 plus 5.5 is 6.5. Of course, so 6 will be of type integer, 6.5 will be of type float. Then we've got 4 plus 6 plus 8, which is evaluated from left to right, and that equals 18. Of course, in this case, it would have the same result either way. But sometimes it's with minusing and other arithmetic that affects the output. Different types. So when we add the string 5 to the string 0 to integer 5, it results in 5. Essentially, it's like adding an integer 0 because it will be converted for this expression. The string 1 plus 5 equals integer 6 because equally to the string 0, this will be converted to an integer, and then the result of that will be added to 5. So that equals essentially integer 1 plus 5. Integer 5, which equals 6. The string 1.1 plus 5 equals float 6.1. An empty string is essentially equal to 0, so that results in just 5. The string foo is essentially equal to 0, so that will result in 5 again. Boolean false is also equal to 0, so that equals 5. Boolean true is equal to 1, so that equals 6. Null is equal to 5, is equal to 0, I mean, so that results in 5. Essentially it's 0 plus 5, which of course is 5, and standard class and empty object is equal to 1, so it'll be converted to 1, and then that will be added to 5, and of course that results in 6. So the next operator is subtraction, the subtraction operator, which, as we saw in the last section when we were talking about precedence, if you remember correctly, it is left associative, so it is evaluated from left to right. So we can see here, this expression, it will be 1 minus 2, 1 minus 3 is equals minus 2, and then the result of that you'll minus 5 from, so it will result in minus 7, because it is essentially evaluated like this. First 1 minus 3, then the result of that will minus 5, and that will be the result. So if we have a look at that, subtraction, yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't mention this bit. This is just simply 5 minus 1, which of course is 4, and that'll be an integer, and then we got 5.5 minus 1, which is 4.5, which will be a float. So that is this result here, 4 and 4.5. And then we got the other one I spoke about, which is 1 minus 3, which equals minus 2, then minus 5 from that, so you get minus 7. And here we are using parentheses to control the order that the expression is evaluated, which I mentioned earlier is a good idea to do all of the time, really. So this makes this be evaluated as 3 minus 5, which of course is minus 2, and then minus that from 1. So if we see the result of that, yeah, so that equals 3. Because essentially you are minusing a minus number, which means you are actually adding that minus number. So because minus 3, 3 minus 5 equals minus 2, you are minusing minus 2, which means you are actually adding 2, because they cancel each other out, essentially, so to speak. So yeah, it's the same as 1 minus minus 2. So that is how the use of parentheses can affect the output with certain operators. Then here we are looping through the array again and seeing what the different types do when we use them in an expression with the subtraction operator. So we can see here 5 minus string 0 is still 5, 5 minus string 1 is 4, because it's the same as just minusing an integer 1. 5 minus 1.1, string 1.1 equals a double 3.9, because it is effectively the same as minusing an integer 1.1. And yeah, we can just see the other results here. Empty string is equal to 0, foo is equal to 0, false is equal to 0, true is equal to 1, so it's like we end up with 4. Null is equal to 0, so we still have 5, and an object is equal to 1, so that results in 4. The multiplication operator multiplies the right operand by the left operand, and is a left associative. So this here will just simply multiply 5 by 2, which of course results in 10, which will be an integer, and this results in this is 2 multiplied by 5, which results in 10.2, and of course that is a float. So here, yeah, 10 is of type integer, 10.2 is of type double, which is the same as float. This will be evaluated as 1 multiplied 3, and the result of that multiply 5, because because the multiplication operator is left associative, so it's evaluated from left to right. So yeah, of course that is 1 multiply 3, and then multiply the result of that, multiply 5 by the result of that, which equals 15. And then like the other operators, we are looping through the array and just seeing what the different values do. So string 0 multiply 5 is 0, because 0 5s is of course 0, and string 0 is the same as, will be converted to an int for this expression and then used. So effectively it's the same as int 0 multiply int 5. String 1 multiply 5 is 5. String 1.1 multiply 5 is float 5.5. We can see an empty string is equal to 0, so the result is 0. A string with the text foo is also equal to 0, so it results in 0, and false is equal to 0, so 0 again. True is equal to 1, so the result is 5, because it's effectively it's 1 multiply 5. Null is equal to 0, so it's 0 multiply 5, which results in 0. And finally, an empty class is equal to 1, so it is effectively 1 multiply 5, which results in integer 5. The division operator divides the left operand by the right operand. So we can see here 5, we're doing 5 multiplied by 1 and then 5 multiplied by 1.5. Let's have a quick look at the result of that. We can see 5 multiplied by 1 is 5, and 5 multiplied by 1.5 is 3.3, and then a bunch of more 3's. Yeah. The division operator is left associative, so it's evaluated from left to right. So this will be evaluated as 10 divided by 5, then the result of that will be divided by 2, which of course equals 1, because 10 multiplied by 5 is 2, and then 2 multiplied by 2 is 1. So let's see the result of that. Yep. And if we use parentheses to control the order that the expression is evaluated, so instead of 10 divided by 5 divided by 2, so the result, instead of the result of 10 divided by 5 then being divided by 2, we do it this way. So 10 is divided by the result of 5 divided by 2. So of course 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, and then we divide 10 by 2.5, which of course is 4. So we can see that here, yeah. So this will be 2.5, then it's 10 divided by 2.5, so that's what goes into 10 2.5 times, and then of course the answer is 4. And here we are looping through the array again, and then dividing through each iteration, dividing the value by 5 to determine the result. And we can see that 5 divided by string 0 equals results in INF, which stands for infinite, because of course you can't divide a number by 0. So that will not work. 5 divided by 1 is 5, of course. Is what goes into 5 one time, which of course is 5. 5 divided by 1.5, which equals a float of this value here, 4.54 a load of times. Again, all of these values here are equal to 0, these three, so that will result in that will not provide a value, because essentially you can't divide a number by 0. Boolean true is equal to 1, so it's essentially 5 divided by 1. Null again is 0, so that doesn't work. And an empty object is equal to 1, so it is essentially 5 divided by 1, which of course is 5. Now we'll move on to the modulo operator, which returns the remainder of a division. So it will divide the left operand by the right operand, and it will return anything any numbers that are remaining after that expression has taken place. So we got 5 modulus 1, then we got 5 modulus 1.5, then we got 5 modulus 2, and yet the with modulus the result needs to be an integer, so if it is a float it will have its decimal point taken off, so anything to the right of the decimal place will be stripped off, and you will only return the whole number. Yeah, so we'll just look at the result of these here. We've got 5 divided by 5 modulus 2, which will result in 1, and 5 modulus 3, which will result in 2. So let's have a look. Yeah, where are we? So yeah, the first two are 0, because 5 modulus 1, of course there will be nothing remaining. If you divide 5 by a 1, there's no remainder on that. If you divide 5 by 1.5, well, again, as I said, the decimal place is stripped off, so effectively it's the same as 5 modulus 1.5 is the same as 5 divided by a 1, and then return the remainder, which again is nothing. So effectively these two are the same. Then we have 5 modulus 2. So the way this will be worked out is it'll be 5 divided by 2, so you go, how many times does 2 go into 5? Well, you got 1, and it has to go into it. The whole number has to go into it. It can't. The number can't be split, so it goes into it 2.5 times. It's how many times does it go in? Does the whole number go into it, and then anything that's left over is remained. So you go 2, 4, and then your 1 remains. You can't go into any more, because otherwise you'll be going over. So the remainder, which is 1, is returned. And then if you did 5 divided by 3, well, 3 can only go into 5 once, the whole number. So then you'll return the remainder, which is 2. 10 modulus 4, of course, the result of that will be 2. 10 modulus minus 4, and with modulus, the result is always the same sign as the left operand. So we can see here the left operand is a positive number, so the result will be a positive number. Here the left operand is a negative number, so the result will be a negative number. The modulo operator is left associative, so it is evaluated from left to right. Yeah, and we can see that this will be evaluated as 40 modulus 7, and then the result of that will be modulus 2. Yep, so 40 modulus 7 will return 5, and then the result of that will be 5. So the result of that is 5. So it'll be 5 modulus 2, and then that will result in 5. In 1, because you do 5 divided by 2, then the remainder is 1. Yeah, but if you use parenthesis, then it will be evaluated as 7 modulus 2, which results in 1, because it's 7 divided by 2, which you go 2, 4, 6, you got 1 remaining, and then you'll do 40 modulus 1, which is 40 divided by 1, and of course 1 can go into 40, 1 can go into any number, any whole number completely, so there'll be no result from that, there'll be nothing returned. So that is the difference. It affects the way this expression is evaluated, will affect the output. Yeah, which we can see here. 40 modulus 7 modulus 2 equals 1. But then if you use the parenthesis, you're doing 7 modulus 2, and then the result of that, you'll do 40 modulus the result, which equals 0. Now, a good use of the modular operator is when you want to check if a number is even. So you can use the number 2 as a divisor in a modulo expression, and the result will be 1 for uneven dividends and 0 for even dividends. So we've got an example here. We just create looping through an array. This here, range 1, 10, will create an array with the numbers 1 to 10. And then through each iteration, we are checking, we are running the value through a modulus expression, with the right operand being 2, and of course the left operand being the value, and we're checking if the result of that equals 1, and if it does, then it's not even. If it is, then it is even. So that's just a good way for checking if a number is even or not. And yeah, you can probably see how that works because of course if you have a whole number and you divide that by 2, then that is going to result, that will not have a result. If you have an even number, sorry, not a whole number, an even number. So for example, if you do 2 modulus 2, that's going to result in 0. If you do 3 modulus 2, which is an uneven number, of course that's going to result in 1. If you do 4 modulus 2, that's going to result in 0. If you do 5 modulus 2, that will result in 1. If you do 6 modulus 2, that will result in 0. So you can see where I'm going, because effectively you're doing, if it's 2 modulus 2, you're doing 2 divided by 2, well, and returning any remainder. There's no remainder. So any number, any even number that is divided by 2, there'll be nothing remaining. 2 can go into that even number exactly without any remainder. And any uneven number divided by 2, of course, will always have a remainder. 2 will never be able to go into an uneven number without having a bit remaining. So now we will look at some other types used in a modulus expression. So an expression with the modulo operator. And we're doing this check here to ensure that the value is not 0. So through each iteration, we are checking that the value is not equal to 0. And the reason being is because you cannot use 0 in a modulus expression, because you cannot divide by 0. So that is why we're doing this check here. And of course we're looping through the array items within the array we created earlier. So have a quick look at the result of that. We can see here 5 modulus string 1 equals integer 0. 5 modulus string 1.1 equals integer 0. 5 modulus boolean true equals integer 0. And these 3 are effectively the same, because if you remember correctly, I said that you cannot use decimal places with the modular operator, or you can use them, but it will strip them off. Essentially, you cannot use float numbers, data of type float, in a modulo expression. So it will convert this to an integer by just stripping off the decimal place. So this will end up being, this first one will be 5 modulus int 1. This will be converted to an integer. This will be 5 modulus int 1 as well, because it will be converted to, first the decimal place will be stripped off and it will be converted to an integer. And 5 modulus boolean true, the true value will also be converted to an integer, and it will have it will be int 1. And all 3 of them result in integer 0 because there's no remainder. 1 goes into 5 exactly. There'll be there's no remainder. It's not like 2 where it will go into it twice and there'll be a remainder of 1. 1 can go into 5 exactly. And this is the same as well, because an empty class or an empty object also will be converted to the number 1 or an int 1. So effectively these are all the same. So we'll have a look at the exponentiation operator next. And the exponentiation operator raises the left operand to the power of the right operand. So it's just like to the power of, if you had 2 to the power of 2, for example, or 2 to the power of 3, you know, that'd be 2 to the power of 2 is 2 times 2, 2 to the power of 3 is 2 times 2 times 2. So that is what this operator does. So here we're going to loop through the values 1 to 3 in an array. We're using range to create an array, and through each iteration we are going to through each iteration we are going to use the exponentiation operator, which is these two asterisks with the current item in the array and the number 1, and the current item in the array and the number 2, and the current item in the array and the number 3. So this will be to the power of 1, this will be to the power of 2, and this will be to the power of 3. And we're going to do that for each item. So we can have a look at the result of that. So you see 1 to the power of 1 is 1, 1 to the power of 2 is 1, and 1 to the power of 3 is 1. Of course, 1 to the power of anything will still be 1. 2 to the power of 1 is 2, 2 to the power of 2 is 4, and 2 to the power of 3 is 8. You can see, of course, this is pretty basic maths. You know, 2 to the power of 1 is literally 1 times 2, which is 2. 2 to the power of 2 is 2 times 2, which of course is 4. 2 to the power of 3 is 2 times 2, which equals 4, and then that you times 2 again with that value, so that's why we get 8. So it's 2 times 2, which is 4, then 4 times 2, which is 8, or 2 times 4, whatever way you want to work it out. And then 3 to the power of 1 is 3, 3 to the power of 2, which is 3 times 3 equals 9, and 3 to the power of 3 equals 27, which is 3 times 3, you get 9, then 3 times 9, which is 27, or 9 times 3. So the exponentiation operator is right associative. So that means it is evaluated from the right to the left. The expressions on the to the right, or the values to the right of the expression, will be evaluated first. So that means this here will be evaluated as 2 to the power of 3. Then the result of that, it'll be 2 to the power of the result of that. So whatever is returned from 2 to the power of 3, you will then do 2 to the power of that number. And as we can see here, this is how it is evaluated. And that equals 256. Now, if you wanted to control the order in which the expression is evaluated, then you can use parentheses, which is what we're doing here. So this will be 2 to the power of 2, then whatever the result of that is, it will then be that number to the power of 3. So we can see here 2 to the power of 2 to the power of 3, which, remember, we said this bit is evaluated first, and then it's 2 to the power of the result of this bit, which equals 256. But then we use parentheses to make the part to the left be evaluated first. Then it is 2 to the power of 2. Then the result of that is, then we use that to the power of 3, which results in 64. And then finally we are looping through the array, and we are through each iteration, we are using the value in the that part of the array, and then we're doing to the power of 2. So that whatever value is in the current iteration of that loop, then we're doing that value to the power of 2. So we can see here it is first is the string 0 to the power of 2, which is integer 0 or has a result of integer 0. Then we're doing 1 to the power of 2, which has a result of integer 1. Then we're doing 1.1 to the power of 2, which has a result of a float 1.21. Then we're doing an empty string to the power of 2, which has a result of integer 0. Then a string foo to the power of 2, which has a result of integer 0, because these two are the same as doing 0 to the power of 2, because they will be converted to their int value, which is 0. So effectively these two and this one are the same. Then and so is false. True has a value of 1 when it is converted to an int, so it's 1 to the power of 2, which equals integer 1. Null has a value of 0 when it's converted to an integer, so it's 0 to the power of 2 effectively, and that results in 0. And if you remember from earlier, an empty object has a value of 1 when it's converted to an int, so this is effectively 1 to the power of 2, which equals or has a result of integer 1. So next we're going to look at assignment operators. Assignment operators are, or the basic assignment operator is the equals symbol, and that is simply used to insert a value into something. So it could be inserting a value into an array or a constant, etc. And you can also combine the equals symbol with other symbols such as an addition or a multiplication, and that is shorthand for example, if you wanted to do if you had a variable that contained a value of 5, and then you wanted to do that variable, you wanted to multiply that variable by say 10 and store the value in that variable, then instead of doing that variable name equals that so instead of doing say the variable is named var, instead of doing var equals var times 10, you could do var times equals 10. So it's just a shorthand way of doing that. So here we can see this is the assignment operator, the basic assignment operator, and it inserts this value here, which is the right operand, into this variable here, which is the left operand. So we can see the result of that. Is 5. And here we are, as I mentioned earlier, we could do something like this: var equals var plus 10, because we want to get the value of var plus 10. But because we want to store that value in this variable named var, we can use this shorthand way of doing it, which is var plus equals 10. So this will store the result of whatever numbers in var plus 10 in this variable here named var. And that is what produces this output here, which is 15, this result. yeah, when you use the basic assignment operator, the value of if you use it with a variable, for example, or a constant, but in this example we're using a variable, the value of this variable here will be assigned to this variable here. So the value of var will be assigned to var2. Now if you then make changes to var2, it will not affect the first variable named var, because the value has been assigned to it. So it isn't assigning a reference to the right operand, which is var in this case. It is just assigning the value. So essentially the variables will point to different values. They won't point to the same value, so changing one of the variables will not affect the other one. So we can see here we're doing var2 times equals 3, so it's going to be the value in var2 times 3. So we can see the result of that. First, yeah, we're displaying var and then var2, so we got var which is equal to, or has a result of contains 15, and then var2 which contains 45, which is the result of 15 multiplied 3. Now you can so we can see here that because the value of an assignment expression is the value assigned, so essentially the result of a assignment expression is the value that is being assigned, you can assign multiple operands within a single expression. So you can assign the value of multiple operands to variables or whatever you're using to store them within a single expression, which is what we're doing here. So in this case, var2 is going to contain an integer 10, and var will contain the result of this, which is 10 multiplied by 10, which of course is 100. So we can see here var contains 100 and 10, and var2 contains 10. Now, as well as assigning by value, which is what PHP does by default, you can also assign by reference. So when you assign by reference, if you have you're assigning a variable, which will be the right operand, into the value of a variable that is the right operand into a variable that is the left operand, you're actually assigning by reference. So you're not simply assigning the value and that's all. You're actually, just noticed a spelling mistake, a typo. Yeah, so you're not simply assigning the value, actually you're assigning a reference. So both variables will point to the same piece of data. So if you change one variable, you are changing both. Whatever happens to one of the variables will affect the other one, because you're actually changing the data that that variable points to, and both the variables will point to the same piece of data. So here we're assigning by reference, and to assign by reference, you prepend the variable with an @ symbol. So here, after this, var3 will point to the same piece of data as var2, and anything that happens to var3 will affect var2, and vice versa. Anything that happens to var2 will affect var3, because they both point to the same piece of data, and anything you do, whatever changes you make, will change that piece of data that they both point to. So as we can see here, we're assigning by reference, and then we're dividing the value in var3 by 2. So, and then, yeah, of course, var2 contains 10. So var3 after this expression will contain 10, and then we're dividing that by 2, which equals 5. And then we're displaying both the value of both variables which will both contain 5. Now, there is one exception to the assignment by value rule, and that is objects. So objects are assigned by reference since PHP 5. You can use the clone keyword to copy an object rather than assigning it by reference. So if you don't want to assign an object by reference, if you want to actually clone that object, so create another copy of it, and then whatever changes you make to that copy will not affect the first or the original object, you can do that as well. But you have to explicitly do it, because otherwise, if you don't do that, any changes you make will affect the original object, because it's being passed by reference by default. It's not being passed by value, so it's not the value being assigned, it's the actual reference. And so effectively the same as I said earlier with these variables here. With an object, when you assign an object to a variable, that variable will point to the same piece of data. So if you have an object stored in 2 variables, both of those variables will point to the same piece of data, and any changes to one will affect the other. So here we can see we're assigning a empty class, an empty object, to this variable here named object, and then we're assigning object 2 to, we're assigning, the object variable, the obj variable, to obj2, and then we're making a change to the contents, which of course is the object of type standard class. So what we're doing here is just simply creating a property and inserting a value of bar, so a string bar, into that property, and then we are just dumping both of the variables that point to the same object, so the same piece of data. As we can see here, they both contain the same exactly the same value, because the change we do here affects this variable here, because it changes the data and they both point to the same piece of data, and it changes so changes to one will affect the other. But as you can see here, we're using the clone keyword, so instead of passing by reference, we are cloning the value. So we're inserting the value of this variable here into this variable instead of passing by reference, and then we can change the contents of this variable here, and it will not affect the original variable, because they do not point to the same piece of data. And then we're dumping both so we can see the difference. As you can see here, this is the original variable that has no more changes, and then this is the new variable, which we can see we've added another property to of foo, and you can see it did not affect the original variable because we cloned it. We did not pass by reference, we cloned it. Now we can see a few examples of combined operators here. So here we can see the addition operator combined with the assignment operator, and then the minus operator, the multiply, the exponentiation, the division, the string operator, the concatenation operator, the modulo operator, the AND operator, the OR operator, the XOR operator, the shift left operator, and finally the shift right operator. So all the operators I just listed are being combined with the assignment operator, with the result of var, which equals 2 each time. So we have a look at the result of all of that. 2 plus equals 5 equals 7. Results in 7. 2 minus equals 5 has a result of minus 3. 2 multiply equals 5 has a result of 10. 2 exponentiation equals 5 has a result of 32. And yet you can see the same going down all of the different results here. So as you know, as I mentioned earlier, this is the same as 2 equals 2 plus 5. This is the same as 2 equals 2 minus 5. This is the same as 2 equals 2 multiply by 5. This is the same as 2 equals 2 exponentiation 5. You get the picture. It's just a shorthand way of doing things. Now, let's have a little look at some type conversion with the assignment operator, or the assignment operator combined with the addition operator. Now, not all types can be converted, which is why I've commented out this one here, because you cannot convert, this cannot be converted in this expression, so it will cause a fatal error. In fact, I'll just uncomment that so we can see the error. As we can see, unsupported operand types. So an array cannot be converted in this type of expression, but the rest can, and we'll have a look at what they are converted to. So we can see here 0 plus equals 5 equals 5, so this will be get converted to an int 0. This will be converted to an int 1. This will be converted to a float 1.1. This will be converted to an int 0. Same with this. This will be converted to 10. So when a string has a number in the beginning, so if a string is just a number itself, a numerical string, then it's a straight conversion from, you know, like for example here, 0, a string 0 can just be converted straight to an int 0. Now when a string contains text but it is prepended with a number, so it begins with a number, a valid number, so anything that PHP sees as a valid number, then it will be converted to that number. So in this case it's converted to 10 and the rest is just ignored. So we only care about this beginning bit, which is 10, and that is what it will be converted to. So it will result in a string 10. So this is effectively 10 plus equals 5, which results in 15. So it's 10 plus 10 plus 5, and this is converted to 0 because it's just a string with text. It hasn't got a numeric value, so it would just be converted to 0. When the number is not at the beginning, like in this case, this is still converted to 0 because the number has to be at the beginning. So here the 10 is at the beginning, so it can be converted to an int 10. Here the 10 is at the end, so it will be converted to 0 because it's the beginning bit that counts. False is converted to int 0. True is converted to int 1. Null is converted to int 0, and an empty object is converted to int 1. Next, we're going to have a look at some bitwise operators. Now, bitwise operators allow you to manipulate and evaluate integers' binary value. So it allows you to manipulate integers at the binary level, of which PHP has 6. So PHP has 6 bitwise operators. Now, if you do not understand binary digits, then I suggest you have a little read up on them. There's plenty of resources on the internet, and because it will be hard to understand this section if you do not have a basic understanding of binary digits. But yeah, as I said, there's plenty of information about them on the internet, so it won't take you long to go and have a read up. I suggest going, having a read up on them quickly so you can gain an understanding of them, then coming back and watching this section. Now, the AND operator compares the binary value of 2 or more integers, and it will return a new integer with a 1 where all of the values had a 1 and a 0 everywhere else. So that will make a lot more sense with a visual example. As I say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we can see here the integer 0 has a binary value of 1, 1, 1. The integer 5 has a binary value of 1, 0, 1. So in this unit here this is the units column. So this will the column that has a value of 0 or 1. This is the 2's column, and this is the 4's column. So it doubles each time. So that means this has a 1 in the 4's column, so that is equal to 4 in decimal, and it has a 0 in the 2's column, so that is essentially nothing, and then it has a 1 in the units column, which is equal to 1, so that's why this has a decimal value of 5, and this has a 1 in the 4's column, which is equal to decimal 4. This has a 1 in the, it also has a 1 in the 2's column, which is decimal 2, and it also has a 1 in the single units column, which is equal to decimal 1. So that is 4 plus 2 plus 1, and that's how we get our decimal 7. So integer 7, which is decimal, has a value of binary 1, 1, 1. Now, as I said, the AND operator will return a 1 for each in each column that has a 1 for both values. So this column has a 1 for both values, so it will return the 1 here. So that means the result will have 4 to start off with. This column has a 4 so far, and then this column has a 1 here, but a 0 here. So it will not return the 1 in this column; it will return the 0. And this column has a 1 in both values, so it will return the 1 here as well. So the result of this will be 5. As I said, we'll return a 1 in this column and a 1 in this column, which is equal to 5. So essentially it returns the exact same number here. 1, because there's a 1 in both columns here. 0, because there's only a 1 in one of the columns here. And 1 here. So we have a look at the result of that. We can see here 7 and 5 equals 5. Which is the expected result. Now we are using the same operator here, but with 3 integers this time. 7, 5, 3, and again we got a visual representation just to make it really clear what it does. So, as you can probably guess, on this time it's only 1 that is being returned, because only this column here, because this column has a 1 in this this row and this row, but a 0 here, so that means it will return 0 for this column. This column has a 1 here and a 1 here, but a 0 in the middle, so it means a 0 is being returned for this column as well. And this column has a 1 in all 3 rows, so it will return a 1 for this column, and which has a value of 1 in decimal. So that is our result. Our result is integer 1. So we can see here 7 and 5 and 3 results in integer 1. Now the OR operator will return a 1 for all columns that have a 1 in them. It doesn't matter. All of the values don't have to have a 1, just as long as at least one of the columns, in the columns, one of the rows has a 1. So for example, in this column here, they both have a 1, so that will result in 1. In this column here, one of them has a 1, so that will result in 1 as well, because it's OR. So only one of the rows has to have a 1 in each column. And then this here, both of them have a 1, so it will return 1 as well. So with this one, it returns a 1 for this row, a 1 for this column, a 1 for this column, and a 1 for this column, which has a result of 7. Which is what we can see here. 7 or 5 equals 7. So I hope this is starting to make a bit of sense to you. So we can see so far we've seen the AND operator where all of the columns must contain a 1 for a 1 to be returned for that column, otherwise a 0 is returned for that column. And the OR operator, so the bitwise OR operator, will return a 1 for any column where either of the values have a 1. So if it's 2 values, only one of them has to have a 1. If it's 3 values, only one of them has to have a 1. As long as at least one of them has a 1. If more of them have a 1 in that column, then that's fine, as long as at least one of them does. Now the XOR operator will return a 1 for any column where one of the values contains a 1, but not all of the values. So for example here, we're using it with 2 values in this example of integer 15 and integer 12, and in this case with the XOR operator, it will in this column it will return a 0 because both of them contain an integer 1 and only one of them must contain it. Yeah, both values cannot contain a 1, only one of them can. And in this column it's the same, because both contain a 1. In this column, only one of the values contains a 1, so this will return a 1 on this for this column. A 1 will be returned for this column, and the same with this column. So it returns 0 for this column, 0 for this column, 1 for this column, and 1 for this column. So the result is integer 3, because this column is a single units, which has a value of 1, and a 1 is returned for this column. And this value is the 2's column, so of course that has a value of decimal 2, so the result is 2 and 1, which result is of course is 3. So let's have a look at the result of that. As we can see, 15x or 12 has a result of 3. Now we're going to look at the NOT operator, which is different to the other operators or the ones we've seen so far, because it only uses a single operand. Yeah, all of the other ones contain multiple operands, but this one contains just a single operand. I'm just going to change that a bit so we can see that better. And what it does is it returns a 1. Essentially it's a bit like the what is the name of the operator again now? So what this operator does is it returns a 1. It reverses the integer that it reverses the bits in the integer, so to speak. So anywhere where there's 1, there'll be a 0, and anywhere where there's a 0, there'll be a 1. So you can call it inverts it, reverses it, whatever way you want to word it. That's what it does. So we can see a 9 will have an integer 9 will have a binary value of 1, 0, 0, 1. So that is, so if I just quickly show you that, just to make it clear, this will be the integer value, move that there, of 9. So it's got, in the single units column, it's got 1, in the 2's column, it's got 0, in the 4's column, it's got 0, and in the 8 columns, it's got a 1. So this one here is equal to decimal 8, and this one here is equal to decimal 1, which of course results in 9. So this is the binary representation of decimal 9. And then when we use the not operator, it will turn this int. So if I just create a copy of that again, it will return this result. So it inverts it. It changes any 1s to 0s and any 0s to 1s. So if we have a quick look at the result of that, we can see here, this is the binary value of 9, int 9, and this is the inverted value. So we can see we're only bothered about this end bit here, because these are simply added because that is how many binary digits it uses to represent an integer. But we're interested in this end part here, 0, 1, 1, 0, which we can see is the opposite of this. It's been inverted. So the 1s here at the beginning and end have been changed to 0s, and the 0s in the middle have been changed to 1s. Now, there's a bit more to this. There's a thing called 2's complement, which is how PHP stores its binary values when they're negative numbers, and it's a bit out of scope for this video. I will probably, essentially, it deserves its own video to explain it properly. It definitely deserves a video that is just that sole purpose is to explain that topic, which I may create one at some point. If you're very interested in it now and you think you really need to know more about it to understand it, then I suggest doing a little search on the internet. Just Google PHP 2's complement or 2's complement, because it is not specific to PHP. It's used essentially on operating systems and in other languages as well. So it's not specific to PHP, and yeah, just have a read up on it. But at a later date, I'll probably make a video that is that its whole purpose is to explain that topic. Now, the next operator we're going to look at is the shift left operator, which shifts the bits left to the power of whatever or however many times is stored in the right operand. So the bits in the left operand, or the integer value in the left operand, will have its binary value, and it shifted to the left the amount of times of the amount of times of the number that is stored in the right operand. So if it's a number 2 stored in the right operand, then the bits in the left operand will be shifted to the left twice. So we can see here we're storing an integer in this variable, which has the integer is 10, which has a binary value of 1010. So 1 in the 8's column and the 1 in the 2's column, which has a decimal value of 10. And then we are shifting it to the left twice. So this will result in 101000. So we can see the bits have been shifted to the left twice. And then we will see the result of that here. So first we got 10, decimal 10, which has a binary value of 1010. Then we once we've shifted it to the left twice, we have a value of decimal 40, which is binary 101000. So we can see the bits have been shifted to the left twice. Yeah, and which is this operator is effectively multiplying the left operand by 2. The amount of time stored in the right operand. So it is the same as using this shift left operator here with var2, which has a value of 2. It's the same as doing 10 times 10. Sorry, 10, 2 times 10, and then 2 times the result of that. So it's the same as multiplying 10 by 2, the amount of times in the right operand, which in this case is 2. So you multiply that by 10 by 2 once, and then again, which is what we're doing here. And that is how we get this result here. Again, 40, a result of 40, which is binary 101000. The shift right operator does the opposite of the shift left operator. So it shifts the bits to the right, reducing the number. It's just the same as divide by 2. So whereas shifting to the left is the same as multiplying by 2, shifting to the right is the same as dividing by 2. And we will see the result of that here. So first we have 10, which has a binary value of 1010. Then once we've shifted to the right twice, we have 2, which is a binary value of 10. So we can see, again, just leave a little comment, 1010, that's the binary value of that number. Then once we shift it to the right twice, it has a value of 10. So it removes these 2 columns here, these 2 values here. So we have, it just leaves this bit because it's been shifted to the right twice. So it removes 2 of the values. And as I said, it's the same as has the same effect as dividing by 2, but it doesn't. With bits, they don't store decimal places, so any decimal place will be removed. And so yeah, we're doing the same thing here. Var equals 10. Then we're dividing by 2 the amount of the amount of times of the number that is stored in var2. So it's, in this case it's var2. So we're doing it twice, and we're using the floor function that will remove the decimal place. So it will round it down. It will round the result down. So that is why we have this result here, which is the same as this result here. Next, we're going to look at comparison operators. Comparison operators have a purpose of allowing you to compare values for equality or inequality and other things as well. Now PHP has, in PHP you can do a strong comparison, which is type sensitive, or loose comparison, which is type insensitive. So strong comparison will compare the value and the type, and loose comparison will only compare the value. So you can look at it as whether a value is equal to another value, or whether a value is identical to another value. So for example, the string 1 is equal to integer 1, but it is not identical. So if you compare them in a strong comparison, that will fail, but in a loose comparison, it will pass. So we can see here, we got first we're going to have a look at the equal operator, which is a loose comparison. and we are going to compare the integer 1 to the string 1. So we'll have a look at the result of that. We can see integer 1 and string 1 are equal. But when we do the same comparison, so this time we're going to use the identical operator, which is the three equal signs. And as I mentioned, that, well, of course, by the name, you can probably tell that that is, or the name is pretty so next we're going to but if we do the same check, or the same compare the same values but with the identity or the identical operator, which is the free if we compare the same values but using the identical operator, which is three equal signs, so this operator here, that will compare the value and the type. Yep, so the values can be seen as equal, but that will still fail in this check. The values have to be equal and of the same type. So if we compare integer 1 and string 1, we will see that that check fails. Integer 1 and string 1, sorry, here, are not identical. So they pass this check, which checks if they're equal, these two values, but they do not pass this check because they are not identical, they're of a different type. So that is a strong comparison versus a loose comparison. So this is a strong comparison, this is a loose comparison. Next, we're going to look at the not equal operator, which is the opposite of the equal operator. So it checks if the values are not equal. So when we check, like the equal operator, this does not care about the type, it only compares the value. So integer 1 and string 1 are equal, which is what results. This is why we get this result here. So this check here fails because they are not equal. So that is why we're seeing this result here. So this is a simple if-else statement. If these values are not identical, then run this expression. Otherwise, run this expression, or this line of code, or this line of code. Now there's an alternative to the not equal operator. So instead, an alternative for this not equal operator, which is this operator here. So a left arrow and then a right arrow can also be used to check if two values are equal or not, or are not equal. Which is why we got this output here. And similarly, they don't care about the type, they only care about the value. So they're checking if the value is equal. So for example, int 1 will be equal to string 1, int 0 will be equal to string 0, or an empty string, or null, any value that is seen. Essentially what PHP is doing is converting that value for the comparison, but you don't need to really know about that. It's doing that internally. You just need to know what values are seen as equal, and there are plenty of values, like an empty string is seen as equal to 0, null is seen as equal to 0, null is seen as equal to an empty string, etc, etc. Now we are sorry, that's an error there. We are here. We have the not identical operator. So this checks if two values are not identical, and this does care about the type. So this is the opposite of the identical operator, where it checks not only the value but the type. So this checks that the value and the type are not equal, are not identical. And that produces this here. 1 and 1 are not identical. See? So when we check these two values using the not equal operator, so either of these not equal operator, then they are seen as equal. See, this check here fails, and it ends up running this line of code. And say similarly, this check here fails. But when we use the same values with the not identical operator, this check passes because they are not identical. They're seen as equal, integer 1 and string 1, but they are not identical. So that's why when we're checking whether they're not identical, this passes. And then this line of code is executed, which is why we get this output here. Int 1 and string 1 are not identical. Here we have the less than operator, which checks if the left operand is less than the right operand. So here we're inserting the value of 5 into this variable named var2, and we're checking if var is less than var2. And then we're displaying if this check passes, then we're executing this line of code. Otherwise, we're executing this line of code. We can see 1 is less than 5, of course. Below that, here we have the less than or equal to operator, which checks if the value in the left operand is less than or equal to the value in the right operand. So here we are inserting an integer 5 into this var here, this variable named var, and then we're checking if var is less than or equal to var2. And as they both contain 5, this check will pass because they are equal. And this checks if they are less than or equal, so it passes when they are equal, as well as if it was less than. So 5 here, we're seeing this output here, 5 is less than or equal to 5. And then we are using the same operator, so the less than or equal operator, but we've changed the value of var2 to contain 4. So this time we're checking, is 5 less than or equal to 4? And of course it is not, it's greater than 4. So, and then yeah, so this check passes, this check fails, so it doesn't execute this line of code, it executes this line of code. 5 is greater than 4. Then down from that we have the greater than operator, which checks if the left operand is greater than the right operand. So we are checking if var is greater than var2, and var contains 5, I believe, and var2 contains 5. So we can see here 5 is not greater than 5, which is this line of code here. So this check fails and it doesn't execute this code, it executes this line of code. Below from that we have the greater than or equal operator, which checks if the left operand is, yeah, that is correct, but just that is wrong. Yeah, so here we have the greater than or equal to operator, which checks if the left operand is greater than or equal to the right operand. So if this variable here is greater than or equal to this variable here, then this line of code will be executed. Otherwise, this line of code is executed. So let's have a quick look at that. Greater than or equal to 5 is greater than or equal to 5. And then we're using the same operator, so the greater than or equal to operator, but this time we've changed var2 to 6. So we're checking if 5, because var contains 5, is greater than or equal to var to 6, because var2 contains 6. And of course, 5 is not greater than or equal to 6. So this check fails, and this line of code here is executed. That's why we can see 5 is less than 6. That is the output, or the result. Yeah. So when you compare a number with a string, the string is converted to a number. So that's why you can compare different types, because PHP will implicitly convert that type when it needs to for a comparison. But of course that doesn't take place when you are actually comparing the type. So when you are using the identity operator or the non-identity operator, of course PHP will not convert the type, because you are actually checking the type. The type conversion will take place when you are only checking if two values are equal, not if they are the same type. So we can see here we're dumping if null is equal to an empty string and if true is equal to an empty string. So let's see the result of that. Type conversion. Null is equal to an empty string, that's why the result is true. But true is not equal to an empty string, that's why the result is false. So we can see here, this returns true, this check here, if null is equal to an empty string. But this check here, if true is equal to an empty string, fails, because null is seen as equal to an empty string, but true is not. Null will be converted. Yeah. When you compare there's a typo there. Yeah, when you compare arrays using something like equal to, or less than or equal to, etc., the array with the fewer members, so fewer values within it, is seen as less. So this array here has fewer members. It only has two values within it, 1 and 2, and this one has 3 members, so three values. So let's see the output of that. Yep, array here, array with 2 values, less than or equal to array with 3 values, and the result of that is true, because it is less than. It's seen as less than because it contains less values. Here we are checking if an array with 2 containing 1 and 2 and an array also containing 1 or 2 are equal, and as you might have guessed, they are. That pass checks, or that pass returns true, because they are equal. Here we are doing the same comparison, but with the identical operator. So we're not just checking if they are equal, we're checking if they are identical. And of course that returns true as well, because they are not only seen as equal, they are also identical, because they are both arrays with with the exact same containing the exact same values. Yeah, so you can only compare arrays that have the same keys in the the keys that exist in the left operand also exist in the right operand. So the keys in the left array, the array on the left, which is the left operand, exist in the array on the right, which is the right operand. So here we can see we have different keys. We are using string keys here, foo, bar, that contain values 1, 2 respectively, and here we are just inserting values 1, 2, or we have an array that contains the values 1, 2, and they will have keys automatically added by PHP, and it's 0 index, so this will have a key of 0 and this will have a key of 1. And then we can see here array foo bar equal is array with these keys and these values equal to an array with these values that will have keys added automatically, and the result is false because they are not equal. Yeah, we're doing the same check with the identical operator, and of course that will return false as well because this is an even stricter check than this one. Objects are seen as greater than anything else. So if you run a comparison with an object and any other value, the object is seen as greater than. It's seen as greater than arrays, strings, whatever. It's, you know, it will always be seen as greater than. So this check here, if this object is greater than an array, will return true. Yeah, that's this check here. Is this object here greater than this array? And that returns true because it is greater than. Arrays are greater than anything else. So if you compare an array to anything other than an object, then the array is greater than any of those values, but it is not greater than an object. So as objects are greater than anything, arrays are greater than anything other than an object. So here we are checking, is this array greater than this object? Of course that will fail because it is not greater than. Then we're checking, is this array greater than int 1000? And that will return true. So an array is not greater than an object, but it is greater than an integer of 1000 or anything else. Next, we're going to look at error control operators. PHP has just one error control operator, and that is the @ symbol, and its purpose is to suppress errors, notices, warnings, etc. So for example, you might have code that will output and may cause a notice, and you don't want that notice output to the screen. Yeah, or it will cause a warning, and you don't want that warning output to the screen. You want the code to, you know, carry on and just not display any error messages or warnings to the screen. And you can use the @ symbol to do that. So here we are dumping the contents of this variable here named var, but this variable has not been defined, so it will cause an undefined variable notice. And if you didn't want that notice to be output to the screen, you just wanted the code to continue and, you know, as if that hadn't happened and not display anything, then you can prepend the @ symbol to the beginning of that line of code. So if we look at the result of that, yeah, we can see here this is caused by that var not being defined. So notice undefined variable, and it still outputs the value, which is null because it's not defined, but it returns this, or it displays this notice. But if I comment that out, then we can see that notice doesn't exist anymore, and this is still executed, line 16, but because of this @ symbol, it doesn't cause any sort of notice. And you might see some code such as foo plus equals bar. Now you might look at that, which refresh, that causes a notice because the variables are not defined. You might look at that and think, how do I suppress this? I'll put an @ symbol at the beginning. There, you can do that. So you might think this syntax looks weird, but you can also prepend it to this, not just at the beginning of functions, you can prepend it to the beginning of code like this. And what I normally do, just to make it look a bit more tidy, is surround this with parentheses, because I think that just looks, to me, that looks slightly cleaner than just having an @ symbol like that. Because it kind of, you may just look at that at a glance and think that this @ symbol is only connected to this first variable, when really it's connected to this expression as a whole. You can see no notices, warnings or errors. So that's it with error control operators. Next we'll have a look at execution operators, of which PHP also only has one, and that is the backticks. And the purpose of the execution operator is to allow you to execute a shell script or a shell command, exactly the same as you'll do in a terminal. So if you're comfortable with terminals, if you've got some experience using terminals, essentially all this does is execute a command the same way if you had your terminal open and you was just typing in commands. So we can see here the backticks, and we're going to execute this command, which is dir, which on Windows will display the contents of the current directory, so the directory that you're currently inside of. And when this is executed, the result is returned. So it executes it, the command, and whatever the result is, it will return that, and that is what we are using to. That is what we are going to display here. So we can see, here we go. Yeah. So this is the result here. Also tells you other information as well. And this, the backticks operator, is identical to the shell execute function, so the shell underscore exec function, and that is what produces this second result here, this identical result, because they are effectively exactly the same. So yeah, that's it with execution operators. Next we'll have a look at incrementing and decrementing operators. PHP has 4 increment and decrement operators, which consist of C-style pre-increment, post-increment, pre-decrement and post-decrement operators. The operators take one operand and affect numbers and strings, and also the null value is not affected by the decrement operators, but will change to 1 when used with the increment operators. So the only values that this affects are numbers and strings and the null value, but the null value is only affected when used with the increment operators, not the decrement. So with the increment operators, null will change to 1, increment to 1, but with the decrement operators, it will have no effect on null. And other than that, you can only use them with numbers and strings, no other values. So here we are using the pre-increment operator, which increments the operand. So they take increment and decrementing operators take only one operand, and the pre-increment operator increments the operand by 1 and then returns it. So it increments the value by 1, then returns the value. And that is what we can see here. We are inserting a value of 1, and then we are incrementing it here. So we have a look at what that does. That results in 2, because of course we're incrementing it, and it increments values by 1 each time. So we'll increment the value 1 to the value 2. it will increment the value 1 by 1, which results in the value 2. And here we are using that the pre-increment operator again, and it will increment this value here and then return it. So we can see we have a value of 3 because it increments this to 3 and then returns it. So this is 2, it's incremented by 1, which results in 3, then it returns that result, and that is what is returned and stored in this variable here. The post increment operator returns the operand and then increments it. So it will return the value, then increment the value. So here we are storing the value of 1 in the variable named var, and then we are incrementing it here using the post increment operator. So we can see that outputs a value of 1. The reason being, it is returning the value and then incrementing it. So the value of this variable here, var, which is 1, will be returned to this function and then incremented. So this function gets the value as 1 because it gets the value before it's incremented. So that's the difference. And then here we are using the post increment operator again, and then with this variable named var, and this will return the value to this variable here named var2 and then increment it. So this var2 will contain 2 because this the value is being returned to it, so it's being assigned to it as 2, and then it's being incremented. So this var2 does not get the incremented value, it gets the value before it is incremented, which is why it has a value of 2. Because this variable here contains 2, which is assigned to this variable here, and then the contents of this variable are incremented by 1. So actually, just to make that clear, I'll output var2 here, var here, and we'll see var has a value of 3 and var2 has a value of 2, because the 2 that is inside this variable is assigned to this variable and it is then increased to 3. So this variable, after this expression, var will contain 3, but this var2 will contain 2. The pre-decrement operator, that's a typo there, and also there. The pre-decrement operator decrements the operand by 1 and then returns it. So it does the opposite of the pre-increment operator. So we can see here var, we're inserting the value 1 into var, and then we're using the pre-decrement operator here and outputting the results. And as we can see, that will have a value of 0 because it contained 1, then it was decremented by 1 to have a value of 0. And here we are decrementing the value of var and then passing it to var2, assigning the result to var2. So that will be -1 here. Now the post decrement operator is the opposite of the post increment operator. So it will decrement, it will return the value and then decrement it. So here we got var equals 1, and then we're using the decrement operator on that value here. And post decrement, it still contains 1 because the value has been returned first, then the contents of this is decremented. So at this point, var has been decremented, so it contains -1, and then again we are returning the value of var, which is -1, and which is 0, because it was 1 here, then it gets decremented to 0. So we're returning the value of var and inserting it to this variable, then decrementing this variable. So that's why it has a value of 0. And if I, just to make things a bit more clear, we can see var contains -1 and var2 contains 0, because the 0 inside var is inserted into var2, and then the contents of var is decremented. So we can see we've got some different values here which we are going to use as the operand for the increment operator here, the pre-increment operator, and then we're also going to use them values in the pre-decrement operator and see what results we get. So we can see here plus string 0 equals 1, plus string 1 equals 2, plus string 1.1 equals 2.1. So you can see this is string 0 is converted to an int 1, or converted to an int for the converted to an int 0 and then incremented. String 1 is converted to int 1 and then incremented. String 1.1 is converted to float 1.1 then incremented. Empty string 1, you can see what the different values, what the result of the different values is with the increment and then with the decrement. And as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, the null value will be incremented to 1, but when you use it with the decrement operator, it has no effect on null. It just doesn't do anything. So that is why we don't have a result here. So next we'll have a look at logical operators. PHP has 6 logical operators which take 2 operands, except for the ternary operator which takes just 1 operand. And these operators only care about the value of the operands. They don't care about the type. So you can think of that as strong comparison versus loose comparison. So the AND operator returns true if both of the operands are equal to true. So here we can see var contains true and var2 contains true. Then we check this result. This check here will pass and this line of code here will be executed. So we have a quick look at that. Logical, var and var are both true. Boolean true, Boolean false. Sorry, the second line is from this. Both are, yeah. So the first output we looked at, var and var2 are both true. That output is produced by this line of code here, and then further down we got these 2 checks, which first checks 1 and 1, which will pass because as I said, it's checking if the values are equal to true, and 1 is seen as equal to true. So of course when we check 1 and 1, they're both seen as equal to true. But here we're checking 1 and 0 is not seen as equal to true, it's seen as equal to false. So this check will fail. Because that is why we got true for 1 and 1, and we got false for 1 and 0. So further down we got the OR operator, which returns true if either operand is equal to true. So both of them don't have to be, as long as both aren't equal, as long as at least one of them is equal to true, then the check will pass and it'll be fine. So here we're checking true or false, and that will this line of code, this logic will pass. This will return true because one of the values contains true. And we can see we got this output here, var or var2 is equal to true. So we can see the output of that, var or var2 is equal to true. So if either of them are equal to true, then this check will return true. So here we're checking, is 1 or 0 equal to true, and because 1 is equal to true, and this only cares if only one of the values has to be equal to true for this to return true, then of course this will return true. But when we check 0 and 0, neither of them return true. So the check, or neither of them are equal to true. So this logic here will return false. And that produces this output here. 1 or 0 returns true. 0 or 0 returns false. Now, further down we have the XOR operator, which returns true if either operand is equal to true, but not both. So if both of the operands are equal to true, then this check will not return true, it will return false. And if both of the operands are equal to 0, then it will return false. Just one of them has to be equal to true. So we can see that produces this var and var2 are both equal to true or both not equal to true. Because it will fail if both are equal to true, but it will also fail if both are not equal to true. It will only pass if just one of the values or one of the operands is equal to true. So here when we check 1 x or 0, that will return true because one of the values is equal to true. But when we check 1 x or 1, and we're checking with strings just to see that you can use different types, but effectively this is the same as 1 int x or 1 int, that will return false because both are both are equal to true, and only one of them can be, or only one of them has to be. And I'll show you 0 and 0 as well. Not equal to true. So if we see the output of those, we can see this returns true because 1 x or 0 returns true, 1 x or 1 returns false, and 0 x or 0 returns false. So we can see that's the output of these three here. Now below that we have the ternary operator, which is the one logical operator that only takes one operand, where the others take two. This takes just one, and it essentially inverts whatever the variable contains. So if the variable contains true, then it will be inverted to false, and if it contains false, then it will be inverted to true. So essentially it's the way of checking the opposite of what the value contains. So if the value contains false and you want the check to pass if it contains false, then you'll use the ternary operator, which will convert the value to true. We can see the result of that here. So this is we're checking if true, because var contains true, and then we're also checking, we're checking if we're using the ternary operator on the var that contains true, and then we're using the ternary operator on the var that contains false. So this contains true, this contains false, and we can see it's been inverted to false, and this one's been inverted to true. So for example, if you wanted to use that in an if statement, you put if not var see var is true, var2 is false. So here we can see that this ternary operator will invert the contents of this var, which is true, and it will invert it to, so in this case it inverts it to false. And this will invert the contents of var2, which contains false, so it will change it to true. Right, it's true. And of course, here we're talking about the contents of var before it is inverted. So we're talking about the original content of var, which is true. So we know that if this fails here, if this returns true, then we know that var had the value of false, because it's inverting the value of var and then checking it. Now, the and operator is identical to the and operator. So this operator here, which is two and symbols, is identical to the and operator. So the operator that is literally spelled and, except for that it has a higher precedence. So we can see here var equals true and false. Yeah, so it affects, because and has a higher precedence than the equals symbol, it means this part is evaluated first. So it is evaluated as true and false, and then the result of that is returned, which of course is false because they're both not equal to true. And this is checking if true. This is checking if both values are true. So, and of course they're not. So we can see here that returns false when we dump it here. But then if we do this check here, var equals true and false, the equals symbol has a higher precedence than the and. The equals operator has a higher precedence than the and operator. So the operator literally with the literal characters A and D, the literal word and. So it's evaluated as var equals true and false. So this part is evaluated first. So you can, just to make it clear how that works, this is how it's evaluated. So var will be equal to true, and then it's checking and false. So after this expression, var will contain the value of true, because it is inserting the value of true into var and then checking and false. Whereas this check is checking true and false with the and sim operator, and returning the result of that into var. So this here will contain true. We can see. Further down we have the OR operator, which is the these two characters here. The pipe symbols. So it's the OR operator consists of two pipe symbols, and it is identical, similar to the two AND symbols being identical to the AND operator. Aside from precedence, the two pipe symbols for which is a OR operator is identical to the OR operator, so the operator that is the literal word OR, except for that the two pipe symbols have a higher precedence. So here we can see we're doing var equals false or true, the OR being the two pipe symbols. And because the two pipe symbols have a higher precedence than the equals operator, sorry, the two pipes operators, the OR operator here, which is the two pipe symbols, has a higher precedence than the equals operator, it is evaluated as like so here, false or true, and then the result of that is inserted into the var, which of course will be true, because when we're checking false or true, only one of them has to be true. So we'll see the result of that, which is true. But then if we use the literal word OR as the OR operator, then the equals operator has a higher precedence than that. So the equals part is evaluated first. So again, I've got I'm using parentheses here just to really make it clear how this will be evaluated, and it will be evaluated as the value false will be inserted into the variable var like this, and then it will check all true. So once we're checking all true, var already has a value of false no matter what, of false, and that's why when we output the variable it contains false. So that is how precedence can make a difference, and why I mentioned earlier that to keep code clean, it is much better to always use parentheses, because you might have noticed throughout this tutorial there's been lots of parts where there's subtle differences that you might not notice. Certainly if you're looking through lots of code quickly, maybe you're a bit tired one day, it's easy to miss something subtle like this. For example, it's easy to not be 100% on the ball and not realize or not notice that this is not going to produce the output you want. But if you use parenthesis all the time, then to signify how you want an expression to be evaluated, then you just eliminate that risk. So next we're going to look at the string operators. Let's close a few of these off. Now PHP has two string operators. The first is the concatenation operator, which joins two strings together and returns the result. And the second is the assignment operator, which will join the right operand to the left operand and also can be seen as a shorthand. So the concatenation operator literally joins two strings together and it will return the result. So we can see here we got this string here, hello, and this string here, space, world. And the concatenation operator here will join these strings together and the result will be inserted into this variable here. So we'll just have a quick look at what that does. We can see the output. That outputs hello world because the variable contains hello world with a full stop at the end. And values that are not of type string will be converted to strings. So when you concatenate a string to another value of a different type, that type or that value will be converted to a string, which is what we're doing here. We are we are concatenating the string number followed by a space to the variable 1. So we'll quickly have a look at the output of that. That's why that variable then contains a string with the value number 1. Now the assignment operator, as I said earlier, joins the right operand to the left operand. So we can see here we first have we are inserting the string hello into this variable here named var. Then we are using the concatenation operator and the with an assignment operator. So this results in an assignment operator which will append this value here, which is space, world and an exclamation mark, to the contents of this variable here. And then we can see when we output that variable, it contains hello world with an exclamation mark at the end. Now when you join a string and a sum, it's important to remember that the string concatenation will take place first, because the string concatenation operator, which is a period, and the plus operator have equal precedence, and they are both left associative. So if you remember correctly when I mentioned earlier, if two operators have the same precedence, then we use their associativity to determine which part of the expression gets evaluated first. So if they're left associative, then the left part will get evaluated first. Yeah, so it will be evaluated from left to right. If they're right associative, then the right part of the expression will be evaluated first, so it will be evaluated from right to left. And in this case, the period, which is the concatenation operator, and the plus operator are both left associative, so the expression will be evaluated from left to right. So in this case, we can see here we're concatenating the string that contains total followed by a colon and a space to the contents of the var variable plus 3. So just to make it clear how this is evaluated, I'm using parenthesis in the example here, in the string, in the comment I mean, and it will be this here evaluated, then this second bit here. So it will be the result of this string here concatenated to this variable here plus 3, and of course the result of this bit will be a string, so you can't use that. It will not contain a valid numeric value, or a numeric string. So the result will be this part will contain 0, of course, because it will be a string that has, when converted to int, has a value of 0, and that will add 3, so the result will be 3. And as we can see that here, that is what the variable contains after this. That is the result of this. I mean, the result is 3, which at first glance you might not expect it to be that, but precedence is what determines the result of this, because it is evaluated as essentially the result of this will be total colon space 2 plus 3, and of course you're essentially adding 0 to 3, because the string will have a value of 0, because it does not start with it does not contain a valid number, and it does not start with a valid number. Now, what you could do is, just to show you an example of something that will be slightly different, if you did that, we can see that it contains 5. We can see, I mean, we can see the result of this is 5, and not that this is a very tidy way to do things, but I'm just showing this for example, because the result of this part here, which is evaluated first, will be a string that begins with 2. You can actually use that in arithmetic, because the string starts with a valid number, so it will effectively be 2 plus 3. But again, this probably almost definitely is not the output you'll be expecting, and it just wouldn't be a good way to do things. Now, the use of parentheses lets you control the way that an expression is evaluated, and I cannot express enough how the use of parentheses is just really a much better way to do things, whether they're necessary or not. It's just a much cleaner, tidier way to do things, and it just removes the chance of errors occurring, which is just really a no-brainer. Means it could just save you headache. It's just another thing that you don't have to worry about. If you get into the habit of always using parentheses to determine or to signify the way that an expression is evaluated, even if it will be evaluated the way you want it to without them, it's still always better to use them. So here, this will be evaluated as var plus 3, and then the result of that will be concatenated to this string here. So we can see that has the output that you would most likely be expecting, which is here is total colon equals 5, because the total of this here is 5. Next we will look at array operators. Now, PHP has 6 array operators, and the array operators are not unique to arrays, but they might have different results if they're used than if they were used with a different type of operand. So first we have the union operator, which is the and symbol, the plus symbol, I mean. And that operator joins the right array to the left array. So the array, of course, the two operands, the operand on the left and the right, will both be arrays, and it will join them together. So here we've got an array that has the values 1, 2, 3, and then we have another array. And then we have that array here as the left operand, and then the right operand is another array with the values 4, 5, 6, but we are setting the keys explicitly on the second array, and I'll explain why in a moment. Just show you the result of that. So we can see first the array contains 1, 2, 3. Then once we append or we add the second array to it, it contains the values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the union operator, which adds two arrays together. Now the reason that we are using different keys here, so we're explicitly setting the keys here, is because you cannot add arrays that have the same keys. If you try and do that, if you try and use the union operator to join two arrays and both the arrays have the same keys, then the values in the right operand, the right array, will just be ignored. So we can see here. So we can see here, attempting to add the items that join the items in this array to this array here, but we just have the items in the original array because they both have the same keys. So you cannot join them together. Now the equality operator, which we've seen earlier, checks whether arrays have the same key value pairs. So here we are creating two arrays, dumping the contents of them, so we can see them. We're using a quick if statement, so this will return true if these two arrays have the same key value pairs. You can see array and array 2 have the same key value pairs. So we can see these are the two arrays, and then this is the result of the if statement. Array and array 2 have the same key value pairs because they do. Now next we are creating another array which has using the array 2 variable again, so replacing the value in the array 2 variable, and this time the array will have the values 1 to 10, and then we are checking, we are using the equality operator again to check if they have the same key value pairs, which in this case they will not. So that is this here. This is the first array, this is the second array, and then this is the result of the if statement, which results in which outputs that array and array 2 do not have the same key value pairs because they don't. So that is this check here fails, so this line of code here is executed. Now the equality operator does not care about the order of the array's items or the type of the values. It just compares that they have it just cares that they have the same key value pairs. So that's all it's checking. It's only checking if they have the same key value pairs. It's not checking if it's not checking the order of those key value pairs or the type. So we can see here, this is the first array which has these key value pairs, and this is the second array, and we can see that the key value pairs are the same, but they're not of the same type. So you can see the key 3 has in this array, the item with a key of 3 has a value of string 3. The item with a key of 3 here has a value of int 3. and that is the first item. Then the second item in the first array is key value pair both 7, and the second item in the second array is key value pair both int 2. And then and then the opposite on the next one. The first array, the third item is key value pair 2, key 2 value int 2, and on the second array, the third item is key value pair of key 7 and value string 7. And then we can see the result of the if statement that compares these two using the equality operator returns that, or determines that array and array 2 have the same key value pairs, because it only cares about the that the key value pairs exist in both. It doesn't care about the type of the values or the order in which the key value pairs exist in the array. Now the identity operator does care about the type of the key value pairs. So it checks that it has the same key value pairs in the same order and of the same type. So first of all, the key value pairs must be in the same order, and second of all, they must be at the same type, as well as, of course, them be contained in the same key value pairs. So as well as it containing the variables or the arrays containing the same key value pairs, they must be in the same order and of the same type. So here we can see that these two variables here contain the exact same arrays with the value 1 to 5 in the same order and with the same keys. And then we can see these are the two arrays. You see they're both identical, and the if statement that checks if they're identical determines or produces this output: the array and array 2 have the same key value pairs in the same order and of the same type. But further down we can see that we're inserting these arrays into the variables, and these arrays contain the same key value pairs, but they're not in the same order and they're not of the same type. And that is, these are the two arrays here. We can see they contain the same key value pairs, but they're in a different order, and they're in they have different types in them. So they have here, the first value is string, and the first value here is 3. And then we can see the second item is 7 7 here and 2 2 here. And yeah, so the if statement comparing or checking if these arrays with the identical operator produces this output: array and array 2 do not have the same key value pairs in the same order and of the same type. So them being in a different order or having a different type or not containing the same key value pairs are all things that can make this check fail. Now the inequality operator checks whether arrays do not have the same key value pairs. So it is the opposite of the equality operator. It simply checks, do the arrays not have the same key value pairs, not caring about the order of the key value pairs or the type of the key value pairs, just that they both exist. So here we are creating two arrays that are different. This array will have an extra item in it. So this array will have 1 2 3, and this array here will have 1 2. And then we are using the inequality operator here with them, and we can see this is the first array which has the values 1 2, and this is the second array that has the values 1 2 3. And the if statement produces this output: array and array 2 do not have the same key value pairs. And here we are inserting these values, so these arrays, into these variables which contain the same key value pairs but in a different order and with the values having being different types. So we can see these are the two arrays that we're going to check, and then this is the result of the if statement, which produces this output here. Array and array2 have the same key value pairs, because like the equality operator, the inequality operator does not care about the order or the type. It just checks, just cares about the values. So it checks if the values are not equal, if the key value pairs are not equal. Now this is an alternative operator for checking equality. So essentially it does the exact same thing as this operator here. So we can see it produces the same output. The result of the if statement using this operator is the exact same as the result of the if statement using this operator. Now the non-identity operator is the exact opposite of the identity operator. So it cares about not only the key value pairs but also the order and the type. So here these two arrays are going to be exactly the same. This variable will contain an array with the values 1, 2, and so will this variable, and they will both have the same keys. So we have a look at the result of that. These are the two arrays that we're checking with the non-identity operator, and this is the result of the if statement. Array and array2 have the same key value pairs in the same order and of the same type. And here we have an array with the values 1, 2, but the value 2 is a string, and then here we have an array with the values 1, 2, but the 2 is an integer. And then we're checking, we're using them as the operands for the non-identity operator, which when used within in the if statement produces this output. Array and array2 do not have the same key value pairs in the same order and of the same type. So even though these two arrays here contain the same key value pairs, the type of this item here, this value here, is string, and the type of this value here is int. So when they are not seen as identical. So when we do this check here, this passes as true because they are seen as non-identical. Now, last but not least, we're going to look at type operators. PHP has just one type operator, which is the instance of operator, and is used to determine if a variable contains an instantiated object of a certain class. The operator also works with descendant classes, so you can use it with child classes and child of child classes, however many levels deep you want to go. So here we can see we've got 3 classes. The first one has a name of foo and does not have any parent classes, so it's at the top level essentially. And then here we have a class named bar, which extends foo, so this is a child class of this class or a descendant class. And then here we have a class named foo bar, which is a child class of the class bar because it extends it, and is a descendant class of this class because this class here is a child class of bar, which is itself a child class of foo. And then here we are instantiating the foo class, so we'll have an object of type foo here, and then we're checking is this variable here an instance of this class. And then we can see that returns true. And then here we are instantiating an object of type bar, and then we're checking if that object is an instance of foo and if it is an instance of bar. And because bar is a child class or a descendant class of foo, then both of these checks will return true. We can see here that is these two here, this output here. And finally we are instantiating an object of type foo bar, and then we are checking that this variable here, which contains the foo bar, the object of type foo bar, is an instance of foo and an instance of bar and an instance of foo bar, and they will both of these all three of these checks will return true, because foo bar is a child class of bar, which is itself a child class of foo. So object is seen as an instance of all three of them. We can see here that is the result of all three of these. So we've come to the end of this lesson. I sincerely hope that you've learned something new from this lesson and you found it useful. If you did find it useful and you think someone else that could benefit from this lesson, then I'll be very appreciative if you could share it with them. And I'm trying to make lessons. I was trying to make a lesson a week, but I haven't really had the time to do that. I've been really busy, so it took a bit longer than I would have liked to make this video in an ideal world. But I will try my best to consistently make tutorials, and lesson 6 should be up on my channel soon, and it'll be up there as soon as possible. So if you're eager to learn more, then don't worry, it shouldn't be too long before I have another lesson up on my channel. And until next time, take care.